Do, do, do. All right. We should be live. And in fact, I think we are, although I'm still waiting for it to update. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to each and every one of you. I hope that you guys are having a good Monday, even though it is Monday. And I recognize that for a lot of people, Mondays suck. For myself, Mondays are actually kind of fun because I don't work on a Sunday. And usually there's a lot of stories that happen on a Sunday. So I wake up Monday mornings and it's like Christmas. It's like, oh, wow, just look at all this news that happened. That's interesting. Caleb, how you doing, brother? So yeah, it's been again one of those Sundays. Although there's I wouldn't say there's some good news as well. We're actually going to be talking about something that I think is really interesting in a minute. I'll just wait for some people to show up, so that everyone doesn't just miss what we're talking about here. So we'll probably start in about 5 minutes or so, just so the people have an opportunity to arrive. But yeah, I would say there's some good news. It's not all good news. It's South Africa, of course. It will never be all good news, but sometimes good things happen. Thomas, how you doing, brother? Good morning to you. Good afternoon to you as well. I hope you're doing very, very well. It's been an interesting day. I think the thing that's took up most of my time this morning was just the Nigerian stuff that's happened, and researching that has been, I would say, super interesting because I've known about the Nigerian crisis for a long time. I have sort of purposefully not covered it just because it's sort of the same thing with the Israel Palestine thing. There's so much that I would need to know in order to render an opinion on exactly what's happening there. So I've spent enough time now researching it where I feel comfortable to actually speak on what's happening in Nigeria and the evils that's being perpetrated there. Because I hate those accounts that's just an expert in everything. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? You go on X and pretty much everyone is an expert on every geopolitical issue. When Russia invaded Ukraine, everyone was an expert on Russian-Ukrainian relationships. Then Israel or Palestine attacked Israel, Israel attacked back, and suddenly everyone was an expert on Middle Eastern relations. China and America is at war, everyone's an expert on Chinese-American relations. I'm not an expert in any of that stuff. So when I want to talk about it, I have to actually research what's the history, what in fact is happening here, and why is it happening. So I think there's some bad stuff happening in Africa in general. Nice to see you live. Hey, Pelamy, how you doing, bro? Very happy to be here with all of you. Very happy to be here. And happy to be with every single one of you that might not be chatting, because I know a lot of you guys are probably working or just not really in the mood to chat. I'm still happy to have you all here, and I hope that you're having a wonderful day. So yeah, I think there's bad stuff happening all over Africa. I think specifically, JT, how you doing, bro? I think specifically Islam has, especially in Africa, Islam has started to basically create itself or turn itself into a very problematic entity in Africa. You go to Mozambique, in the north of Mozambique, for example, you have Muslims slaughtering pretty much everyone who doesn't want to submit, including Christians. You go to Nigeria, the exact same thing is happening. All over Africa, you have these Islamic extreme groups that are going around slaughtering people by the thousands. And what's so interesting to me, and as I said in my video as well, just a quiet place, how you doing, bro? What's interesting to me is how everyone's just quiet about it. Everyone made all of this noise about Palestine and Israel and how just absolutely abhorrent it was what Israel was doing. Now that, and I say now as if it just only recently happened, a lot of these countries have had Christians being murdered by Muslims for years now at this point. But not a peep. No one says anything about anything. Everyone's just sort of quietly going on with their lives. where's the Greta Thunbergs of the world? Where's Peter Kriel and his nonsense that he keeps spouting about? Oh, I should show you guys this. This was just, I mean, the levels of retardation that you would need to reach in order to do what Peter Kriel did here is absolutely flabbergasting. Let me see if I can find it quickly for you guys. You need to see this. Oh, here we go. And I apologize ahead of time that I'm subjecting you guys to this dude. I know a lot of you really don't like the guy, and I fully understand that. I respect that. But just take a listen to this. Let me just make sure.
The Bible has been used as a great obstacle in the progress of humanity.
When I went through some of your prior work,
it's interesting that he would say that, because the Bible has been the tool that has led to breakthrough after breakthrough. In fact, the Bible is the very thing that allowed for modern society to come into effect. It was Christians are the fathers of science, because the original scientists believed that if we have a God that is intelligible and therefore can be understood, that God would have created a universe that can be understood and can be observed, and it would not be changing all the time. Because if you know anything about science, you would know that the old Roman approach from Aristotle and his ilk, they didn't believe in a static universe. They didn't believe in a universe that was always the same. They believed that it sort of changes from your perspective, right? So everything is just sort of up in the air and you can think about it rather than observe it. It was Christians that said, no, if we serve a God that isn't changing ever, then that means we can observe his universe and we can look at how he's creating it. And they literally called it natural theology. That's what the original science was called, natural theology, because they believed the Bible was the spiritual theology, right? That's how your spirit gets fed. But then nature is God revealing his creation to us. That's what science is all about, right? So him saying that is just, it's insane that he would even think that, the Bible has stood in the way of progress. But of course, what Peter Kriel, when he talks about progress, he's not talking about actual, literal human progress. Peter Kriel is talking about abortion. He's talking about gay rights. And we shouldn't even talk about gay rights here. He's specifically talking about homosexual marriage. He's talking about the right of the state to do with its citizens whatever it wants, right? Because most socialists want the state to basically tell citizens what they can and cannot do. This is severely problematic in Christianity because only God can tell people what they can and cannot do. There is nothing higher than God, and there is nothing higher for us than God. So we don't worship the state, but socialists and communists need you to worship the state. So when Peter Kriel is talking about advancements in society, he's literally just referring to the evil stuff that him and his ilk would like to do.
You indicated that there's a relationship between religion and colonialism.
So my point of view has always been that when we look at
his point of view has always been, dude, you're 5 years old. Like you cannot say my point of view has always been. Since when? You left high school, what, 3 years ago? Not even. You have no point of view, at least not one that's originally formed. Every single word that comes out of your mouth, I can find in any left-wing handbook. Like, literally, I just need to open any liberal handbook and I'll find your opinion there. You're an NPC. That's insane.
The history of Africa. You see a lot of African indigenous spirituality before the start of colonialism. People worshipping forefathers as ancient spirits up the mountains or in the clouds.
Yeah, you also see a lot of human sacrifice, a lot of child sacrifice. You see a lot of abhorrent evil practices amongst the ancestor worshipping throughout human history and throughout all human civilizations. If you go and you actually read the Old Testament, I'm currently in Deuteronomy, my first ever full reading of the Old Testament, and you listen to how Moses tells them, you will not serve these gods from these people around you. And then he lists why God gives them an express command that they will not mix with the people around them and they will not allow their gods anywhere near Israel. And that is because their gods demand things like child sacrifice, like human sacrifice, and this is abhorrent to God. So, sure, the Africans did have many different religions and many different things that they did, but among those were things like human sacrifice, things like child sacrifice, very evil practices that was abolished by Christianity. That's true, right? That's 100% true. The problem that Peter Krill will run into here is if he knew anything about history, but again, he's 5 years old, so he doesn't know anything about anything, is that Christianity isn't native to colonial Europe. In fact, Christianity in Africa predates Christianity in Europe by several decades to several hundreds of years. The idea that it was Christianity that the Europeans brought to Africa to suppress them, it's sort of like, wait, but Christianity was also brought to Europe in the same way that the Europeans brought Christianity to some of the tribes in Africa. The Ethiopian Bible, for example, predates, it's one of the oldest Bibles we have, is the Ethiopian Bible. So the idea that Christianity was just purely European and Africa had none of it, that's just wrong. Christianity is older in Africa than it is in Europe. It's just that in Europe, it spread like wildfire. And because Europe was already technologically more advanced than Africa, they were able to spread that message a lot quicker than what it did in Africa. And as a result of that, that unlocked the potential that would eventually be Europe.
Things to do with nature. And around the start of the colonial trade, for most of Africa, that changed. People started practicing in Africa organized religion. They started reading texts for belief, which they've never done because their evidence has been nature, has been the cloud or the sun, or their forefathers answering through meditation or whatever. It's never been Christianity. Christianity as we know it today was brought to Africa alongside Western thought, alongside Western philosophy. It was given to African people at a large scale as a way to divide the mind and physicality, making...
Okay, so again, I'm going to ask you this simple question. Everything you just said about how Christianity arrived in Africa is true for Europe as well. Christianity started in Jewish Israel. That's where Christianity started. The Jews, Jesus and all of his disciples were Jews. Right? So you can't even say that it's native to Europe. In fact, the Europeans, the early Romans, rejected it. They killed the Christians by the thousands because the Christians were doing something that they had no knowledge of. They were pagans. They worshipped nature. They worshipped many, many gods, and all of these gods had some derivative from within nature. And it was Christianity that conquered Europe because of the message itself. So why is it true that Africans are held back by Christianity when Christianity was the very thing that allowed Europeans to skyrocket out from amongst the rest of the world? It was, if you look at the Christian revival, right, Europe explodes as a result of this. And eventually it was Christianity that allowed Europe to basically control the rest of the world. Why is that true for Europe, but not true for Africa? If indeed the way Christianity arrived in both of these continents is exactly the same, then surely Africa must have had its break. You see, the problem with leftists like Peter Krill is the exact same issue that we're going to be talking about in a second here when it comes to, the ANC and leftist thought. Nothing can ever. Peter Kriel is the ultimate racist. You see, because from Peter Kriel's perspective, there is nothing black people can do to solve their own problems. Black people cannot solve their own problems because, and Peter will never admit this because he himself doesn't even understand that this is what he believes. But Peter Kriel believes that black people aren't intelligent enough, smart enough, or capable enough to solve their own problems. So what black people require is a white savior. They need some white boy from, like, I don't know, the 90s, not even the 90s, the 2000s, to help them, right? Because without his help, what would the poor black people do? And as a result of this, black people are turned into children. This is infantilization at its core. You see, black people can't be blamed for anything because they're little innocent birds that just, everything just happened to them. Woe is me. And as a result of this, Peter has to step in and solve it. So the problem is, because logic doesn't really work, if you really dive into any of his positions, like every single time you take one of Peter's positions and you apply actual firm logic to it, the position unravels relatively quickly. So what Peter does instead, and this is pretty much bog standard for every single leftist, you just blanket it, right? So everything becomes a problem for the black population. Christianity is a problem for the black population. Slavery was a problem for the black population. Apartheid was a problem for the black population. White people are a problem for the black population. Economics is a problem for the black population. Capitalism is a problem for the black population. Breathing is a problem for the black population. Math is a problem for the black population. Education is a problem for the black population. You name it, and it is a problem for the black population. Why? Because none of these things individually explains it. If they actually drill into every single one of these positions individually, the narrative breaks down. The narrative does not survive. And so, by blanketing it, they can come up with a new term. The term is systemic. Right? So, it is a systemic problem. As soon as you make it systemic, we can't fight it. Because I can say, well, where is it? Oh, it's the system. Okay, but where in the system? No, the system. It's like, okay, so how am I supposed to fix this? No, we have to completely overthrow the system. Everything has to go. We have to start anew. It's like, oh, well, that's convenient, considering that's also what you wanted to do, right, from the beginning. While the earliest documented Christian texts originated in Ethiopia, ipso facto, Christianity was born in Africa. Thomas, yeah, I mean, Christianity was born in Israel, right? That's where it started, in Jerusalem. Yeah, it was Jerusalem, where Jesus was crucified, and where the first apostles sort of spent most of their time. But if you look at Acts, you see that Paul and most of the apostles spent the majority of their time in Asia Minor, which would have been Arabia, Turkey, and some African areas. So you see that most of their ministry was done in Africa and in Arabia, not in Europe. In fact, Paul desperately wanted to travel into Europe, but he was killed before he could even go to Europe, right? So Paul never even got into Europe. It was only after most of the apostles had died, either killed by the Romans or just died, that the next people were able to push it in, right? So yeah, I think Aurora, how you doing? Just a quiet place. How you doing, brother? So yeah, I find it super interesting that leftists all have the exact same thing, and every single argument that they have is designed in such a way that it cannot be targeted, right? You can't defeat it because they throw it so wide, so open, that there's no way to even defeat the argument, because you'd have to target 100 different things at the same time. And that just gives them time to sort of maneuver their way out of it. You have another example here. Let me just see if I can find that. I retweeted it earlier today. This one, right? Here you have another black lady who is saying that we're not asking for reparations just for slavery and colonialism. We demand reparations for neo-colonialism too. So it's not just colonialism. It's not just slavery. No, it's now also the made-up term neo-colonialism. And if there's something I have learned, it's that whenever a leftist uses the words neo, basically everything after that is complete BS. Doesn't exist. Completely made up. Neo is their term for my goalposts just got wheels. That's what neo means. My goalposts just got wheels. It effectively means that you cannot bog me down because it's neo. It's fugazi. It's completely made up, right? So I can move that goalpost all over the place. You'll never catch me. And that's effectively what this is. The reparations that they so gleefully demand, let's just drill down to one fundamental truth. There is no society on earth in the history of mankind, no nation, has ever not experienced incredible injustice. My own people, the Afrikaner people, went through 2 Boer Wars. During those Boer Wars, the English came basically virtually to the brink of total genocide of my people. Total genocide. We went from, I think it was something like 130,000 Afrikaners at the time to a little less than 20,000. That's how many people the English killed as a result of those 2 Boer Wars. Virtually, we were extinct at that point. We didn't demand reparations. We didn't demand that someone feel sorry for us. We stood back up, we got back, and we just started working again. Look at the Irish. The Irish were subjugated into slavery by most of Europe, as well as in America, by the way. Very few people know this, but the vast majority of Irish descendants in America were taken as slaves to America because Ireland was small and the British thought, let's go. Why not? You look at Germany, the Saxons. They were taken as slaves by the Romans. You look at the Gaul, today's French. They were, at one point, Julius Caesar led an attack into Gaul where he killed 1 million Gauls and he took 1 million Gauls as slaves. They stood up and they were fine. Right? They stood up and they worked for themselves. They didn't blame their problems on everyone else. They didn't sit on an ash heap and constantly cry, woe is me. They got up and they fixed their lives. Except in Africa. Africa appears to be the one continent where Africans will not fix their own lives. Instead, what the white liberal has done, and this is perhaps the biggest evil that the white liberal could ever have exacted upon the black population of Africa. They sold them the easy answer of victimhood. They sold them self-pity. And once you're trapped in self-pity, you will never fix your own life. You can't fix your own life. Because self-pity is an interesting thing. I don't know how many of you have ever dealt with self-pity. I myself have caught myself in the past where I go through bouts of self-pity, where you feel so sorry for yourself. And anyone who's ever felt that will know that there's a strange kind of enjoyment from the idea of being a victim, from the idea of woe is me. It's a funny kind of, I don't know why, but there's something in that we seem to like. Our minds seem to enjoy that state. And white liberals have sold that state to black people en masse. This is why Africa cannot solve its own problems. This is why there will never be a single African nation that rises to the level of a developed nation, why you will never get a first world African nation, not until black people start to realize that victimhood isn't going to fix you. The only thing victimhood is good for is promising that only, or guaranteeing that only a savior can save you. And then allowing for very corrupt and very evil politicians to masquerade as your saviors. That is my biggest problem with Western liberal mindsets. It's these people that despise their own race. Look at the letter, the 44 Afrikaners that wrote that letter. The only problem is that every single one of the Afrikaners on that letter have openly and publicly stated that they hate Afrikaners. They don't like Afrikaners, and yet they somehow speak on behalf of Afrikaners. Piet Kroukamp, for example, said that Afrikaners should not exist. The term Afrikaner is merely to separate or create separation between us and everyone else. Never mind the fact that it's a literal culture, right, and a literal people and a language attached to that culture. But no, so it's just they hate their own people, but they also hate black people. You see, these people hate humanity. And they believe themselves to be so good, so immaculately evolved, that without them, we, the rest of the world, would not be able to survive. We need them. I have a question for you guys in chat. How many of you have run into leftists? How many of you have family members that are leftists, if I may ask? Thanks for the clarification, Stephen. Ethiopia was mentioned earlier. I needed to ask. No worries, Thomas. So much so that when the Crusaders went there, they named the state Jerusalem. Christianity originated in the 1st century AD in the Roman province of Judea, a region encompassing parts of modern-day Israel and Palestine. It began as a Jewish Christian sect and was based on the teachings of Jesus. True. Also think the Queen of Sheba was from Ethiopia, and she is also mentioned in the Bible. True. Shaka Zulu genocided millions. Does Peter even know that, or is he going to blame colonialism? Oh, Spock, how you doing, bro? No, he will blame colonialism. Because everything has... Look, if your view is that black people can never be blamed for anything because they're literally incapable of solving their own problems, you must always come up with a different reason for why black people may have done stuff that is largely immoral or bad. So when a black person does something bad, it's not that black person that did the bad thing. It's actually the thing that whatever we identify that made him do the bad thing. So after that black guy on the train, on the subway, stabbed the white Ukrainian girl, you saw leftists literally blaming colonialism and the slavery mindset that made him so violent that he stabbed an innocent white Ukrainian girl. Right, so he's not even capable of being held responsible for slaughtering another human being. Right? Not even that can be blamed on him. No. Even that has to be blamed on some kind of racial issue. Because remember, if you for a second admit that black people can take responsibility for their own lives, you're done. Right? Your entire worldview falls apart. Because what's your point? Why do you exist if black people can actually do their own stuff? Pretty leftist, though, falls on turf lines more than economic or racial justice lines. Oh, Caleb, fix her. Everyone was 18 years old at one point, right? That's when one's a leftist. Just a Quiet Place, that is true. Although I think increasingly what we're actually seeing is a very steep divide between, or sort of a very clear divide happening between amongst men and women, right? Where the majority of women are going super far hardcore left. This in spite of the fact that the left offers no answers to women. If anything, if you look at the leftist solutions to women, it has led to a near doubling of the suicide rate. Women are now more unhappy than they've ever been before, at least in recorded history, since we've actually started gathering these stats. Women are incredibly unhappy. Men are just as unhappy, although it's nowhere near as bad as it is for young women, but it is starting to catch up. You see men going super hard to the right, women going super hard to the left, and what they actually find is that the answer lies somewhere in marriage. So what they see is that the majority of conservative women are married, and what they also see is that when women get married, they tend to become more conservative. They follow their husbands as time goes on. What they don't know and what the researchers can't know is whether or not women who have a tendon or women who have a preference for marriage are just naturally more conservative. And so that's why the statistics sort of bear that out. Or if it is actually a case of when a woman finally marries a man and realizes that all men aren't scumbags and that men pretty much live to serve. They sort of soften their approach to who their men are, right? And it becomes a lot easier as a result of that. That they don't know yet, but that's sort of what the statistics bear out at least. Everyone was 18 years old. Hy sê man, ek sit met daai probleem, 'n linkse persoon in my familie. Isak, all I can tell you, my advice to you would be friendly, be honest. Never try to soften your position in order to appeal to someone else. You have to be honest about every single thing that you believe. If that is enough reason for them to stop talking to you, then so be it, right? But you have to be honest. I have a family member, an uncle specifically, that is super far left wing. He has voted ANC pretty much since 1994. He hates white Afrikaner culture. He hates Afrikaners with a passion. I'm always very friendly with him. I will never be a dick to him in any way, shape, or form. But we also get into a lot of fights, right? I haven't seen him for a long time because I live in Cape Town now, and he lives all the way up north. But whenever we used to hang out, like at family gatherings and stuff, it would take less than an hour, and he would start screaming and yelling at me because I don't share his bonkers beliefs. And I always push back. I try to be respectful, which of course he doesn't, but I would say that's probably the only way you can deal with it. And hopefully through your life, they start to realize just how wrong they are. It reminded me of foreign aid to Africa. Black leaders would blame Westerners of plundering their countries and turn around and allow China to do the same and then accept foreign aid. Oh, but Calvin, that's literally it, right? If you're a victim, you need help. You need a savior. And you'll ask or you'll accept help and saving from literally anyone that offers it, right? And that's the problem for Africa. That's the big issue for Africa. Built nothing, invented nothing, couldn't read or write 100 years ago, and yet we are surprised they destroyed everything in less than 30 years. Oh, Joyless, let me show you something. I rate this on a different place, but I'm not allowed to tell you how to do it. You'll just have to. I'll show you the headline, right? Because I'm not gonna subscribe to Times Live, but there is a way. Let me see if I can explain this to you in a way that would make me not get in trouble. So there are certain services that very recently started to hit the market where you could very easily copy the address of an article, right? Then paste that address to this service and say, what does it say? And this service will then tell you exactly what is in the article without having to pay. I'm sorry, but I'm already paying for a number of South African news services. I'm not also paying for Times Live. It's ridiculous. For me to actually be able to cover the news, I would have to pay $1,000 plus just to have access to all of the news sources. That's insane. So I'm not signing up to any more. But Matt, yes, literally. I don't know if that one does it. Think More X. That's the one that I always use for that. But I'm sure ChatGPT could also do it. You just ask it to summarize. But anyway, so the article in question here basically goes into a whole bunch of stuff that you should already know. The point, however, is that almost 300 of KwaZulu-Natal officials, these are people who work in the government, cannot read or write. The other problem is, as this article points out, a lot of these people are in stuff like the budget offices for the province. They work in places like procurement. These people are signing quotes and audit reports that they themselves cannot read. They cannot read the reports that they're signing. So you're talking about just a complete, I guess you could say, collapse of the South African society, and that's literally where we are. Right? That's legitimately where we are now. Makes the claim women just don't actually care and just want home life provided for, which is all their politics boils down to. Caleb, I would not disagree with Carl in that. I think if you look at the stuff that women scream for, and I don't want to sound derogative, so let me change the wording there. If you look at the stuff that most women demand, right, from a political standpoint, women today demand the exact same stuff from the government that just 100 years ago they demanded from their husbands. The exact same stuff. Want to feel safe. Yeah, that used to be the husband's job. Want to be provided for. That used to be the husband's job. Want to be privileged and receive preferential treatment. Used to be the husband's job. Want their children taken care of. Used to be the husband's job. Wants medical freedom to basically get whatever surgery or treatment they require. Used to be the husband's job. If you look at the things that women demand from the government, it's security, well-being. That's what they demand. Both of these are things that the husband used to provide. So Carl Benjamin is absolutely not wrong when he says all women really want is to be taken care of. The mistake that women make is that the government will never be able to supply any of these things. Not to the level that a husband would. Right? Ever. But I believe that we're first going to have a serious crash in the female political sphere. Like, women are going to have to be, they're going to have to experience the fullness or the end result of their politics before they will realize their mistake. So we sort of have to just allow that to run out, and there's nothing else we can do, right? They're going to have to face that. And for those men in the chat that might be wondering about this, yes, we will be the ones that help, right? We will be the ones that carry the brunt of that. Of course, as men, we're not going to allow women to face the full consequences of their own actions. That's just not, we've never done that. In the history of mankind, we have never allowed women to face the full consequences of their actions. We're not going to do it this time around either. But we do have to allow them to see where their politics lead. I mean, hopefully it'll fix itself. Oh, bro, are you serious? 300 government officials can't read or write just in KwaZulu-Natal. That's not even for the rest of the country, Thomas. That's just KwaZulu-Natal. Seems similar to Sci-Hub and LibGen, right? And also, you would be shocked by the amount of illiterate principals of schools. The stories my mom, she's a principal herself, shares is just, come on, I would actually not be shocked. The amount of stories I've heard from people in the education system in South Africa, it is insane. It's absolute insanity. But I have a story for you guys that you won't read in any newspaper, but let's call it my own journalism that I've done. That's the point, though, state control. That's also how they kept slaves in line. They separated families and ensured that the family unit was destroyed so there could be no uprising or loyalty. Aurora, you're absolutely correct. 100% on point. But anyway, so I wanted to show that someone mentioned just the terrible state of education in Africa. And I wanted to show you. We have people who are running this country who can't read or write. And we're told by the ANC that BEE is a good, it's a good policy. General seems to be spiraling downward. Caleb, you're not South African. Trust me. In South Africa, so the pass rate in South Africa is 30%, right? It's a 30% pass rate. Even if you pass matric in South Africa, it is the equivalent of standard 8, or I don't think the rest of the world uses standard 8 anymore. Grade 10, at least here, it's called grade 10. When you're 16, the equivalent for the rest of the world. So kids who finish high school at the age of 18 has an education the equivalent of kids who are still in the middle of high school in the rest of the world. That's how far educational standards have dropped in this country, and they continue to just go down every single year. But all right, while we're here, you guys clicked in order to hear about Mbeki. But before we can talk about Mbeki, we have to talk about this, because this informs a lot of what happened with Mbeki. So I realized I've been sort of tugging you guys along, just sort of keeping you interested with all of these other stories while we get to the meat and potatoes of today's video, or of the live stream today. But all right, so Ramaphosa yesterday convened a special GNU meeting. They did not inform the press. Ramaphosa told every single leader of the GNU to keep it secret. Now, according to the spokesperson of Ramaphosa, this wasn't because they were going to discuss some clandestine anything. It was just because they wanted a meeting where the media wouldn't be involved, so all of the leaders of the GNU could speak their minds, could say exactly how they feel, could say exactly what they think should happen and what they think shouldn't happen. The problem, of course, is that as AfriForum's own, the current leader of AfriForum, Peter Mulder. No, not Peter Mulder. He's the minister. What's the other one called again? Man, his name is escaping me now. Let me see if I can find it. Corné Mulder. Not Peter Mulder, Corné Mulder. Excuse me. Yeah, for a second there I was like, wait. Pretty sure he's also Mulder, but why am I not getting the name? But okay, Corné Mulder actually explained that this is the first time the GNU is meeting since the election. The very first time. The problem is that if you actually go and look at coalition politics throughout the world, coalition leaders tend to meet at least once a month, if not more. Usually what they'll do is they'll get all the political parties to meet each other, right? On, say, a 2-week basis or a monthly basis, they'll meet, they'll discuss some of the directions they want to take going forward. They'll come across, they'll figure out a compromise. And then the leaders that are the ministers at the time, they'll do whatever the political parties have decided. In the new GNU that I have said from the beginning isn't a government of national unity. It isn't even a coalition. The only reason the ANC ever called this GNU was to keep power. That's all it is. The ANC has no interest in governing with anyone else. I've said from the beginning that this government will be unstable and that this government will achieve nothing. I was told about 4 months ago that I'm just a hater and I just hate South Africa and I want to see South Africa fail. But I said the GNU will not work. And the reason why the GNU will not work is simple. The only way coalition politics really work is if you have parties that are willing to make concessions. You have to have parties that are either super aligned on all the great issues, or you have to have parties that are willing to compromise. The ANC isn't willing to compromise on anything. They want what they want, and if they can't get it, they'll just do it anyways, right? At least here in South Africa, because none of the other leaders appear to have any interest in doing anything. They just seem to go along with whatever the ANC is pushing. So it will just, Copper Rose, how you doing? Buzz Lightyear, how you doing, bro? So it'll just never work. That's sort of the reality of what we have here in South Africa. This GNU cannot work. The problem is that there's no other government of national unity that can work. A part of this conversation now for this is the discussion of expanding the government of national unity to make space for the EFF. If you want to see a dysfunctional government, include the EFF in this. The EFF will disrupt and destroy the GNU faster than you can imagine. Of course, the ANC needs that. They want to push the EFF into government because the ANC wants to go more extreme on their hardcore left-wing views. The problem right now, and according to Ramaphosa himself, he's not super happy with John Steenhuisen because the DA and John Steenhuisen continues to bemoan some of their laws. The ANC wants to do what they want to do, and they don't like the fact that the DA is continuously second guessing them. But then, and this is perhaps the biggest one, right? Let me just see if I can find Ramaphosa's the exact quote here. You have various leaders within the ANC. So these are high-level people within the ANC. Oh, here we go. This is according to several ANC leaders who contacted the Sunday Times this week and indicated that Ramaphosa seemed determined to exit the government before the end of his official 5-year term in 2029. This is apparently part of why Ramaphosa wants to do this GNU meeting now. He wants to set up the ANC in such a way that he can leave by the end of 2020, by the end of this year, early next year. Interestingly enough, I'm not saying it will happen, but I can see a world in which Ramaphosa wants to get the EFF into the government of national unity as a way that he steps out of government by the beginning of next year, and they then nominate Julius Malema to be the president of South Africa, even though there is a government of national unity. Now, before you go, that will never happen. Why would the ANC nominate Julius Malema? The ANC has a serious popularity problem, insofar as they don't have a single leader that can replace Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa has wanted to quit, at least according to sources, 3 times. 3 times now, Ramaphosa has begged the ANC to let him go. The ANC refuses to let him go. Why? Because they have no one to take his place. There's no other leader that is popular. France Grenier, they did the polling on this, and what they found was that while Ramaphosa is no longer as popular as what he once was, he's still leaps and bounds more popular than anyone else in the ANC. So from the ANC's perspective, they're sort of like, wait, but if we lose Ramaphosa, we're guaranteed to lose the next vote. Guaranteed. There's no way we keep the vote. But more importantly, if Ramaphosa steps down as president, the next logical choice is Paul Mashatile. The GNU partners will not support Paul Mashatile. And I'm not just talking about the DA, although the DA won't support him. And remember, the way this works is Paul Mashatile will become the interim president while the parliament votes on a new president. For the ANC to actually get Paul Mashatile passed in parliament, they would need the DA's vote, because the EFF and the MK isn't going to support Paul Mashatile. So if the DA doesn't vote for Paul Mashatile and no one else votes for Paul Mashatile, the only other option is early elections. The government would have to be declared non-existent and a new election would have to be called. The ANC perfectly understands that if a new election is called now, they will probably lose more votes. They're not popular with the country right now. So this might be a final last-ditched effort by the ANC to hold on to what little power they can have. What little power they can have. They can remain in government for a short while longer, and Julius Malema will at least be president, even though his party has very little in the form of power within the GNU, but it will at least give them some foothold, and they might be able to argue or debate with him and get him to agree to certain things. I'm not saying that will happen. It's a fairly unlikely scenario, but I don't understand any other reason for why you want to get the EFF into an already unstable GNU. The GNU is already not working. The last thing that will make it work is the EFF also now being included. In fact, it will make it worse. So there's a big question mark for me around this move. Why does Ramaphosa want to have that? And that, by the way, isn't a secret speculative source is close to. That's according to the spokesperson of the president himself, have said that part of the agenda here is to discuss the expansion of the GNU, to discuss possible inclusions of parties like the EFF into the GNU. That's why Cyril Ramaphosa called this meeting. Cyril Ramaphosa is also very upset that he's constantly being. Let me read this for you so that you can laugh the same way that I did. Ramaphosa is said to be unhappy about his relationship with DA leader John Steenhuisen and his party, which has frequently challenged laws such as the Expropriation Act and more recently the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Act. The president has also not taken kindly too often being second-guessed by ANC stalwarts such as former President Thabo Mbeki. Ramaphosa is not having a good time as president, ladies and gentlemen. And I realize that shouldn't be funny, but it is funny to me. I like that the man is suffering as president of South Africa. It brings me joy. But all right, so let's talk about Thabo Mbeki. And I'm going to read you just one line here. This is the most important line. Thabo Mbeki speaking about the leaders of this country. I don't know what they lead, but they are not thought leaders. That's how he ended his interview. Let me read you the full quote. I think it is the beginning of a different process, not just to discuss higher education, but also the question, what does our intelligentsia do to provide an answer to the multiple crises in our country? You have a responsibility. You are the only body that can legitimately say, we are the thought leaders. The politicians are not thought leaders. I don't know what they lead, but they are not thought leaders. That's damning, right? Like hearing the former president of South Africa, perhaps the only good president South Africa had, hearing him say that the current leaders, he doesn't even know what they lead, but they're definitely not thought leaders. That's wild. Now, he does actually explain why. And this is a point I've made before as well, much to the hatred of many people who always want me to glaze the DA because apparently saying anything negative about the DA is just the end of the world. But Thabo Mbeki himself points out that things like the National Development Plan isn't a plan. He said it in this interview. It's a vision. It's not a plan. There is no plan. And when Thabo Mbeki was asked, well, what about the plans of the government? Thabo Mbeki himself admitted the government has no plans. It just has visions. It has ideas, things, dreams that it would like to achieve. They have no plan. They have no, we want economic growth. Well, that's a noble goal. But how are you going to achieve that goal? You see, that's the plan. And this is the one thing that, according to Thabo Mbeki, actually, not a single leader in South African politics currently have. All of the leaders of South African politics have visions. All manner of crazy stuff that they want the country to be. All manner of crazy stuff that they want the country to see. But not a single one of them have a plan. How are we getting to where you want us to go? What's the roadmap? This is eerily missing. And I'm genuinely convinced that we are led by the stupidest people in the country. The absolute stupidest people. And I think Thabo Mbeki agrees with me, which is always nice, right? Cyril knows he is a Trump breath away from being exposed as the world's most evil leader ever. Sounds like the Doomsday Nuclear Genu. Parasol, you're not wrong. After everything Helen Suzman, Nadine Gordimer, and Helen Zille did for them, they still won't vote DA. First of all, I'm trying to... South African politics is complex, right? And it is true that we still have a giant portion of our society that votes along racial lines, that believe that apartheid will make a comeback if they vote for any other party than the MK, EFF, or ANC. Although I think increasingly the ANC will lose a lot of support. But it is just as true that the majority of South Africans don't even vote. In fact, I've said this before, I've showed you the stats on this. If you actually include all adults who are able to vote, but not registered to vote, so they're the right age, they just don't register to vote, including the people who are registered to vote but don't vote, it's actually almost 80%, I think it's 76% of the total voting age population of South Africa don't vote. And the reason they don't vote, I'm almost willing to bet for most of them, it's that they don't know who to vote for. No one represents them. They don't look to race politics. They don't look at the EFF and think the EFF represents them. They don't look to the MK, the ANC, DA. None of these parties represent them because none of these parties stand for what they believe is good for this country. So I would argue, I think the fall of race-based politics in South Africa might come sooner than people think. It's going to look bad for a while, and we should always remember that it's always darkest right before the dawn, right? CCS, how you doing, bro? It's always darkest right before the dawn. But we also have to understand that change can sometimes happen so quickly. You know, all it takes is one day. In a single day, you can go from everyone just thinking racially to suddenly people losing that and changing their minds and stuff. So I would argue I'm hopeful for the future of South Africa. I'm fully aware that bad stuff can happen and that we might still stay on this train to give you guys some clarity here. If we're talking about change, it took the people of Argentina almost 100 years to wake up to the evils of socialism. Almost 100 years that these people have suffered at the hands of socialism. There's been spots where they voted themselves sort of into parties that weren't quite as socialist, but then they always returned right back to the big socialist parties, specifically Perón's party. And it took almost 100 years for them to go, okay, wait, this is enough. We can't keep doing this. Everything's falling apart. This country is going to hell in a handbasket. We need something else. And they voted for Javier Milei. So it is possible that we might have this, whatever this is, for another 60, 70, 80 years, right? I don't think that that's what will happen, but it can happen. I'm just optimistic that I think a lot of people in South Africa do want change. They're just not convinced that any political party currently will offer that change. And this is where I think conservative Christian values needs to make a comeback. We need a movement that sells Christian conservative values to young people and to people around this country, that sells capitalism, that sells common sense governance. Because I think people are desperate for it. I think people are starving to actually get there. The issue, of course, jumping from one story to the next, while we're not yet in the enlightened era of South African politics, we are dealing with Zuma's MK now looking to collapse KZN, or the government of KZN. The headline is a little misleading here from Mail and Guardian, because effectively the MK isn't physically looking to collapse KZN, although I do think if they were to fail in this political coup that they're trying to pull off, they will probably do something more physical in the future. But effectively, what the MK is trying to do is they're now passing a motion of no confidence against the current premier of KwaZulu-Natal. And the problem is that after he is out, what will happen is the MK and the EFF will form a coalition. And so what this will mean is that the current sort of coalition that governs has about 40 seats, and the EFF and the MK, as well as one other party, have about 40 seats in the local legislature. So it will be a lock, which means they won't have a mayor. And if there's enough time that passes, they will have to call a new election in KwaZulu-Natal. And MK is obviously playing on this idea that they can win even more votes in a new election, because the ANC has just made themselves worse and worse and worse. I thought they hated each other. Copper Rose, it's important to understand that in South African politics specifically, no one really hates anyone. In South African politics, every single leader only says what their people want to hear. So if the people want to hear, oh, we hate the white people, they hate white people. Until, of course, they do business, in which case, love white people. Oh, we hate the MK. Oh, yeah, we hate the MK. Except when they want to do business with the MK and then they do business with the MK. So it is sort of it's a fugazi, right? It's mostly just party politics to make people think that they have a different choice. When in reality, you don't really have a choice here in South Africa. You're voting for whoever is the next person to loot. And that's not saying that the DA is as bad as the ANC, because they're not. If we're talking about better options, the DA is by far a better option than the ANC. My problem with the DA isn't so much that they're looters or that they're going to steal or be corrupt. I don't think they're going to be as corrupt as the ANC, but let's be real. It takes a special kind of person to be more corrupt than the ANC and the EFF and the MK. So, perhaps South Africa have run out of talent in that regard. I think my problem with the DA is far more woke politics. The DA is super far left wing, and that bothers the living crap out of me. You go to Cape Town and you find rainbow painted crosswalks. It's like, dude, really? Really? No one gives a crap about this in South Africa. We have a population of less than 6% gays. No one cares, right? If you go and you look at the actual polling in South Africa, about 75% of South Africans say they probably won't have a problem with a gay person in their family, but over 50% of South Africans say that homosexuality is wrong. So the DA standing for gay rights in South Africa is just like, why? What's the point? You're not gaining any favors here, and that 6% of people, their vote's not going to matter, right? Because most of them aren't even gay. They're just women who happen to be confused at that time. At this point, I don't want TPUSA. Ilumi. I want a conservative Christian movement. Do you think Turning Point USA is the only conservative Christian movement on the planet? Do you imagine because conservative Christian values happen to be a thing that belongs to Turning Point USA, South Africa cannot have that too? I'm conservative and I'm Christian. Every single political belief that I have is informed by Christ. So I believe that if I'm going to start a political movement, Christ has to be the center of that political movement. That's not American politics. That's Christian politics. The reason it looks similar to you is because Christians are family regardless of where they are. My brothers in America who are Christian, I am far more close to them than I am to a non-Christian in South Africa. That's just the facts. I'll give you the truth here. A Christian in America is of more importance to me as a Christian than an atheist in South Africa, because the atheist is not family. The atheist does not form part of my family. The Christian does. So that's why we look similar, because we have the same God, we have the same Father, we believe the same stuff. But it is not bringing American politics to South Africa. It is bringing Christian politics to South Africa. And no, that's not the same as having a theocracy. I don't want a theocracy. I don't believe the church should be in charge of the country, but I do believe that your politics and your leaders should be Christian, and Christianity should inform what your leaders do. I believe this is important. ANC, EFF, and MK are the same party. Wake Up South Africa. Dude, I would... I would probably include more parties in that, actually. You're right, but you have the Good Party, for example. You have Bossa, for example. All of these parties are effectively just ANC or EFF light parties. You have Action SA, which is effectively just an offshoot of the EFF at this point. Elizabeth can at least be based. She's called out some issues of wokeness. Yeah, I don't mind Helen Zille, but I also don't like her. My problem with the DA is different to that of the ANC. Do I think the DA will be a better government than the ANC? Yes, absolutely. Do I think the DA will be a good government? No, I don't think so. I have my problems with them. But fundamentally, I think there will be a better one. I hope this doesn't happen because this will be actually quite sad. I think Durban has suffered enough. You know, I don't think the people of Durban deserves more suffering. They're probably going to get more suffering because they continue to vote for the ANC and the EFF. So just vote Freedom Front Plus in future. Matt, how you doing, bro? The Freedom Front Plus will never win an election, and here's why: history. As much as I wish we as a nation could move away from racial politics, there's something of like historical notes that stick to you, right? In a way that you can't escape. And I think the Freedom Front Plus will always be captured as the Afrikaner only party, which is fine if that's what they want to be. But of course, they've worked really hard to try and turn that around, to tell people we're not just the Afrikaner only party, we're for all minorities in the country. The problem is because they were once just for Afrikaner people, everyone will always see them as sort of like the Afrikaner party. So I don't think Freedom Front Plus will ever win an election. Can they grow their vote share significantly? Sure. And I want that to happen because I think more competition is good. But I don't see them ever winning. That's the sad part of it. Because they are genuinely trying. I think the other problem that the Freedom Front has, it's a bunch of old guys, man. Like, they need young people. And I get, Corneille Mulder is a great guy. Don't get me wrong. I love listening to him. He's very intelligent, and I don't mind him. But he's old. They need new young blood that can come in and actually turn the country around, right? That can suggest new things. They need a facelift. And sadly, I don't see that coming from... They need someone that can rally the forces, right? That can go to university campuses and preach the message of politics to the university students. That is willing to travel all over the country, go to township after township after township, discussing, right? They need that, and I don't see that from their current leadership. Nick it over themselves, race means nothing. Matt, I fully agree with you. And I wish we could live in a country where race doesn't matter. I wish that. Sadly, we don't live in that country, right? And only leftists dream of living in dreamlands. Sadly, race will always matter, right? Factionalism will always matter. This is why Christianity is so good, because it binds people around common good values rather than race or culture, which can sometimes be very sort of weird. But if absent religion, people are always going to come around to sort of finding ways of banding together. Christian values are not good at all and should never be in politics, school, society. You're saying that as someone who benefits exclusively from Christian values. The very fact that you're allowed to hold that opinion that you do right now is because of Christian values. Before Christianity, almost every society on this planet would have slaughtered you and killed you because you said something that they did not agree with. Freedom of speech is completely a Christian value. Freedom of religion, Christian value. Freedom of person, the very fact that you're allowed to exist and no one is allowed to kill you, is a Christian value. So you're out of your mind, sir, and all I would say is you need to go educate yourself because you clearly don't know what you're talking about. First thing, being able to join in. Jay, well, how you doing, brother? 500 years ago, people who claim to be Christian would have slaughtered you. Absolutely correct. I'm not going to sit here and say that Christianity doesn't have a bunch of people that did awful things in its name. You're absolutely correct. Today, if you're not Muslim living in a Muslim country, they will still slaughter you. That will not happen to you in a Christian country. Because the very same people that used the Bible to commit extreme atrocities, that same Bible was used to give you the freedom to now criticize that Bible. It wasn't atheists that stopped the killing. It wasn't atheists that stopped the genocides. It was Christianity. It wasn't atheists that stopped slavery. It was Christianity. It was Christians. So go educate yourself, sir. You don't know what you're talking about. Most countries are secular and culturally Christian. Stephen has mentioned he's not advocating for a theocracy. Yeah, you should absolutely never have a theocracy. Ever. It would be that's devastating. The church should not be in control of the country, which is the mistake that has happened throughout history. But that's because we had kings, and kings were naturally believed to be anointed by God. And so as a result of that, the king and the church was sort of viewed as one thing because the king is the head of the church. And then you get really bad and evil people, same as you do in governments, right? Really bad and evil people that get to the top and start to do really bad and evil stuff. And they take passages out of context and justify all manner of killing, right? Or all manner of slaughter. So yeah, that does happen. Absolutely. Most countries are secular and cultural. I have heard you speak a few times on Christian things. What are the main things we need to look out for when searching for a church? Jay will look for a church that follows the Bible. You want a gospel preaching church. What does that look like? So I'm a Baptist, and so I'm going to tell you to find a Baptist church, dependent on where you live. Some Baptist churches are insane, but most of them are really good. So I'm going to argue get a Baptist church if you can, mainly just because their church structure is really good. Baptist churches are congregationally led, meaning the congregation is in charge of the church. There is no body that tells the church what it can and cannot do. My own church, Strand Baptist Church, is a phenomenal church. So if you're in the Helderberg or Cape Town area, you're more than welcome to pop by on a Sunday morning. Strand Baptists, super awesome, 9 o'clock on a Sunday. Really good. But I would say find a church where they don't just preach to make you feel nice. That's the most important part. I remember once after a service, we were standing outside, and I was speaking to a girl, one of my friends at church, and she said to me, "Oh, it was a great sermon, but she just wishes the pastor ended with more good news, right, and not just this gloomy, sinful nature stuff, but some good news at least." And I said to her, "What do you mean? This was one of the most uplifting messages or sermons in a long time." And she was like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, we are sinners. None of us can save ourselves. We all deserve to go to hell. That's where we deserve to go. Thanks to what Jesus Christ has done for us on the cross, we can now be we can receive salvation and mercy and grace from God. That's the best news you can imagine. Like, there's no better news than that. Like, Christ died so that you can finally escape the wrath of God. How is that not great news, right? Because prior to Christ dying, you would have been subject, rightfully so, to the wrath of God, because you are sinful, you're evil, you're defiled. Find a church that preaches the gospel in its entirety, and not just the good news, as some churches do. But then, yeah, just read the Constitution, test it against the Bible. If they hold any views that you can't find scripture to back it up, probably not the right church. Probably not the right church. Like a mountain, how you doing, bro? The heavens have come to the liberal mind virus. I don't know much about Eastern Orthodoxy, I will admit. We have some fundamental disagreements as Protestants, obviously. We do have some fundamental disagreements with the Eastern Orthodox Church. But I will say my problems with the Eastern Orthodox Church is far fewer than my problems with the Roman Catholic Church. And all I want Roman Catholics to look at, your Pope just blessed a block of ice. If you ever needed evidence that your church is no longer following Christ, that is it. The head of your church, I will remind you, in the Roman Catholic faith, the Pope is the spokesperson of Christ. The Pope is Christ's representative here on earth. The representative of Christ here on earth just blessed a block of ice. If ever evidence was needed that your church is not following Christ, that is it. And that should make you go, yeah, maybe it's time for me to reform this bitch. Because she needs to be reformed. Because currently, she's a prostitute. She is not the body of Christ. There's some Catholics aren't super happy with the new Pope. Yeah, I would also not be super happy with the new Pope. Some form of separation from church and state will have to happen if true togetherness is to be achieved. There must always be separation of church and state. But separation of church and state does not mean separation of religion and state. And I'll explain to you why. The idea that we can separate religion and state is bonkers. I'm a Christian. Every single one of my choices, every single one of my views are informed by Christ. I don't hold a single view that isn't informed by Christ. So let's imagine I become president tomorrow. Do you imagine that the laws that I will pass will be independent of my faith? Of course not. The laws that I pass is going to be as involved in my faith as I am. I mean, that's just how it works. So you can't really you can't really separate these two things. They are united. They are one thing at the end of the day. A person and their faith is connected. Apartheid laws. I will pass apartheid laws. Yulimi, based on what? Based on what? On the fact that I believe that all men are created equal in the image of God? What in that sentence tells you that I would have the right to pass apartheid laws? I'm not the ANC. I don't pass apartheid laws. I don't care about the color of your skin. I care about the kind of person that you are. If you're a bad person, you'll go to jail, and then we'll murder you. That's right. The first thing I do when I get into office as president would be to bring back the death penalty. And there will be a death penalty for people who rape, people who murder, and government officials that steal from the state. Very first day in office, I arrest every single member of the ANC, every single member of every single political party in this country, full investigations. If you are found even so much as half guilty of corruption, death penalty, done. And not nice. There won't be any human rights for criminals. If you're caught doing crime, you will do hard labor until you either die from it or you reform. When we see, oh, he's now a nice guy, you can go free. Otherwise, you'll die in a prison camp, working your ass off because you're a thief. You shouldn't be there. And politicians will die, and not nice. We'll bring back some of the more archaic forms of the death penalty. Zero tolerance for corruption is one of the reasons Singapore is where it is today. Oh yeah, there goes 80% of the population. Hey, bro, if that is what it takes, then that is what it takes. But I am sick and tired of the nonsense of criminals having more rights in this country than ordinary citizens. Thomas Sowell said it best. And for those of you who don't know who Thomas Sowell is, he's the greatest economic mind probably ever. I love Thomas Sowell. But Thomas Sowell said it best. Mercy for the guilty is punishment for the innocent. And that is something that is so rampant here in South Africa. Do not rape, do not steal. These are principles which every man of every faith can embrace. These are not polite suggestions, the saints. Craven X, my personal opinion, for any sort of crime, well, for both rape and murder, that's instant death penalty. I will ask no questions and I will give no quarter. And it won't be nice. It won't be the injection because we're trying to protect their human right. No, 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 no. Let's bring back the guillotine and let's broadcast it for the entire nation. Why? People need to see what happens to a criminal. They need to be able to see it. It needs to be ingrained in them. If I murder someone, they're going to put me to death in a horrid way. And everyone's going to see it. We're not going to hide it. We're not going to pretend to be more sophisticated than everyone else. No, no, no. We're not sophisticated. If you're a thief, you're going to suffer like one. Right? And we're not going to mince our words. We're not going to give them human rights. You can get your human rights when you get out. After that, you're just stuck, right? Paying your bills to society effectively. Okay, so HBB, you seem to be someone who really doesn't know what he's talking about. You seem to say things that you've heard your prophets say, and you just repeat them as if they somehow mean something. I am going to ban you from the chat because I don't mind people sharing their opinions, and I don't mind free speech. I actually prefer it. What I do mind is someone who says things that aren't backed up by any facts whatsoever, and yet says it with such vigor that it's clear they don't know what they're talking about. They've never actually done any research. No, you'll come back eventually. So I'm going to make sure that you never come back. Peace out, bro. You'd have my vote, like Mountain. Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, I am sick and tired of. Okay, so here's the things that drive me up the wall in this country. Like, genuinely drives me up the wall in this country. Number one, the infantilization of black people. I cannot stand it. Black people are not children. Black people are not innocent little victims. It's time that black people start taking responsibility for the failures of their own lives. Stop blaming everyone else. Stop looking to everyone else for a handout or a free lunch. Take care of your own business. Everyone else throughout history has had to do that. Every other civilization that has suffered at the hands of another civilization, and there is not a single civilization on this earth that hasn't suffered at the hands of another civilization. They all had to stand up and fix their own crap. They couldn't get freebies from everyone else. It's time that Africa, as a united continent, realize we have to fix our own shit. We have to take care of ourselves. You can't ask for reparations. You can't ask for special privileges and special rules. You have to fix your own crap. That means taking responsibility for your life, getting to work, and fixing it yourself, right? That's the thing. I'm sick and tired of this mentality within our country that black people are innocent little victims and they can never save themselves. Enough of that bullshit. It's insulting. If I was a black person, I would be insulted by that. It's insane. Secondly, I'm sick and tired of leftists who pretend like if we just do a little bit more, we'll somehow fix it all. We just need a little bit more of this BEE stuff, just a little bit more of the affirmative action stuff, and then magically it will all come roaring back to life. Even in the GNU nonsense that I read you guys, this secret GNU meeting that they were holding, the ANC insists that BEE cannot be rolled back because it would undo the progress that they've made. And I keep asking you, what the hell progress? What are you talking about progress? Where's the progress? Like, they keep mentioning progress and I keep going, what progress? Because I'm not seeing any progress. What progress are they actually referring to? The economy today is worse than it was in 1994. The economic growth is worse than it was in 1994. Unemployment is worse than what it was in 1994. The rand is worse than what it was in 1994. Electricity is worse and more expensive than what it was in 1994. So what progress, I ask you? We now have 27 million unemployed people in this country suffering every single day to make ends meet. That's more than what was in 1994. What progress? So if you're a leftist who continues to live in this fantasy land that, oh, we're sort of okay, you're out of your mind and you're detached from reality. You don't know what you're talking about. And you are an enemy of the people. And when I get into power, if I ever get into power, you will be among the people that will be rounded up and given the death penalty swiftly. That's what will happen. Because your kind of evil is specific. You are the reason for the suffering in the world. If you are found that you were colluding with the corrupt government officials, if I was the president, you'd get the final solution. Because you were complicit in this. I'm not suggesting that we should go out killing people. Just want to make that clear. I'm not calling for the death of people. I'm merely saying, if I was president, and if the death penalty was a thing. And then the last thing that I think annoys me, it's not even the last thing. There's more things that annoy me. But it's among probably the most annoying things to me currently in the country. Our politicians. I know politicians throughout the world are terrible. I understand that. I understand that there's no country that really has good politicians. But it feels like South Africa's politicians are particularly terrible. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't feel like I'm wrong though. I feel like I'm correct in saying we have the worst politicians in the world. By a long shot. We have so many politicians in this country that you will never know what they truly believe because they've never even said it. They don't have the principles to say what they truly believe. They believe whatever is popular at the time to believe. John Steenhuisen and the DA famously anti-BEE. John Steenhuisen, Minister McPherson, as well as, what's the guy's name? There's another minister or deputy minister. All three of them have implemented BEE policies without question in their own ministerial departments. All three of them. Publicly, the DA, no BEE. Refuse any BEE. In government, yes BEE. Let's push as much BEE as we can possibly muster. John Steenhuisen, from 2020 onward, almost every single year, multiple articles about him criticizing farm murders in this country, criticizing the ANC for not acting on farm murders, going so far as saying it's a pandemic, the amount of farm murders that's happening in South Africa. John Steenhuisen stands in the White House in front of the entire world and boldly state there is no genocide in South Africa. This after you have articles of him admitting that there is one. But as soon as he gets into power, literally that's the meme. That's the meme. When you almost imagine when Trump asked, so guys, is there a genocide in South Africa? John Steenhuisen was just like, trying to tie his, tighten his shoes, realizing that he's wearing flip-flops. Or in Afrikaans we say, hy het sy skoene probeer vasmaak, maar toe besef hy dra plakkies. That's sort of the issue. Even Trump does not agree with the genocide, you goofball. Of course he does. That's why he literally just amended the US refugee status to only accept or mostly accept Afrikaners from South Africa. What on earth are you talking about? Um, all over the world, and that is what our leaders are doing now to stay in control. It's all about government control. Once that happens, you make everyone poor and ensure only the politically connected get a hand up. Not wrong. From one of the most corrupt politicians. PJ, why? You see, I love when people say he's one of the most corrupt politicians, and then the only evidence you'll offer, and I'll speak for you because you all speak from the same hard drive. You're going to mention that he's a felon because he has 34 felony charges against him. That's going to be one of your points, right? Then you're also going to say that he has a bunch of bankrupt companies, which proves he's not a good businessman, because that's usually the second thing you guys say. And then you're going to say he's a racist or whatever. You're going to make something up, right? On each of those, it exposes how little you know, because you have actual liberal leftist Trump-hating lawyers that have admitted the felony charges that was brought was so weak, that's why the judge never actually enforced it. The judge found him guilty but refused to sentence him. You want to know why the judge didn't sentence him? Because the second he's sentenced, he can appeal. And the judge knew that on appeal, the entire case falls apart. Because none of the things that he was actually charged with is actual crimes. It was invented in order to make it seem like he's a criminal. But they knew that it wouldn't hold up. And so they just sort of quietly they just allowed it to stand so that they could call him a criminal. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, no harm done. He can't actually appeal because there's no sentencing that's been handed down. So that whole case is a complete bogus piece of crap. Then let's talk about the bankruptcy stuff, because most people also don't know how that works. If you're a businessman and you have not declared bankruptcy, at least in America, it used to be like this in South Africa, but one of the few good things that the ANC actually did do, and this was Mbeki who did it, was change bankruptcy laws. So in South Africa, it used to be exactly like this. So what would happen is, if you declare bankruptcy, all of your debt would effectively be forgiven. Because how can you pay your bankrupt, right? So what businessmen used to do back in the day, they would rack up an enormous amount of debt and then declare bankruptcy. So now they can't pay back the debt. So all the debt is forgiven, and then they just continue doing business. They start another company. That company buys out the company that's technically bankrupt, and they can continue doing business. They no longer have any issues, right? There's nothing. There's no debt. This is how they do it. This is how most businessmen do it. On that front, I actually agree with you. I think that shows that Trump isn't a great guy. He was much younger when that happened, so maybe he has had a change of heart, but I don't agree with that, because you do end up costing a lot of people a lot of money that they have to lose because you claim bankruptcy. But it doesn't show that he's a bad businessman. It's just playing by the rules that the government has laid out. So it is what it is, right? I don't know, the U.S. Embassy changed the refugee program since I looked at it last. No, the refugee program still exists in the same way that it has. It's just Trump now changed it to the amount of refugees that they'll accept. PJ, I'll hand you the Epstein files. There's something going on with the Epstein files that no one knows. If your argument is that Trump is on the Epstein files and that's why he won't release it, you're not thinking logically. Think logically. The Democrats hate Trump. They literally installed judges to try and basically remove Trump from the race. So the Democrats are clearly not above destroying him as a person. If Trump was on the Epstein list, the Democrats would have been the ones to release that list. Biden had the list. Biden had 4 years to release the list. He didn't do it. The Democrats have the list. they have not released the list. Why do you think that is? If Trump was on it, you bet your ass they would have released it. And yet you won't find a single Democrat or Republican willing to release the list. Why is that? Could it be that Trump's name is on the list? Sure. I think there's a lot of people whose names are on the list, and I think that's the problem. If you ask my personal opinion on why that list hasn't been revealed yet, I don't think Jeffrey Epstein kept. I don't think Jeffrey Epstein kept meticulous records. Kimmy, how you doing? Saying, "Oh, here's Bill Gates, and I took him to my island so that he could sleep with young boys." I don't think that's what Jeffrey Epstein did. I think Jeffrey Epstein kept the list of all of his clients, of which he had thousands. Not all of them were pedophiles. Not all of them went to his island in order to meet with underage people. A lot of them were friends of his because if you wanted anything done in Washington, D.C., Epstein was usually your guy because he had so many connections thanks to all of the work that he did, that if you wanted a building permit, if you wanted a special importing or exporting permit, you'd need to get access to the government, and Jeffrey Epstein was the man that could make that happen. And I think that's why that list has never been revealed. At least that's my opinion.
Damn.
Right?
Thank you.
I think the list has never been revealed because if they revealed that list now, there would be thousands of names on that list of people who are guilty of nothing other than doing business. Right? They didn't go to some island. They didn't sleep with underage people. They didn't they didn't do anything evil. They just wanted to do business, and they were told, "Hey, talk to him. He kind of knows what he's talking about, or he can help you." And so they did, and they paid him legitimately for their services, and that's sort of what it is, right? I think that would be my thinking on it, at least. So yeah, I have no idea. Someone just became a member. I really appreciate that, G. Was that gifted sub or was that your membership? Gio, I really appreciate you becoming a member of the channel. Thank you so much, sir. Your support is very, very much appreciated. And hopefully it allows me to get some actual researchers and investigators and stuff so we can do more of this, right? But just with actual evidence for all the crap that's happening in our country. But I truly appreciate you. Thank you, sir. The Democrats are the ones who want the list to be released now. No, they're not. They had the list. They didn't release it. Now the Republicans have the list. They won't release it. Why do you think that is? Right now, it's easy for the Democrats to say, release the list, release the list, release the list, because they know the Republicans will never release the list, because the Republicans are looking at the exact same list that the Democrats are looking at. So it's the ability to morally grandstand, knowing that nothing bad will ever happen. You won't get into trouble because you know the other side is going to do it, right? So you can say, release the list, because you know the other side will never release it, but this is free points for you. This is the exact same thing that the Republicans did, if you remember, during Biden's presidency. The Republicans were like, release the list, release the list, release the list. Trump actually ran on the promise that he would release the list, and I think that's because Trump didn't know it was on the list. I think the second Trump saw the list, he realized this is a nightmare. Innocent people's lives will be destroyed as a result of this list because there's no way for us to know who is in fact the evil people on the list and who are just people who were just doing business. Like, that's the issue. So do you release the list because you promised to release the list and destroy thousands of lives as a result of that? Or do you take the political flack? You just go, look, fine, I'll carry it. Fine, I'm not releasing the list. Because I don't want to start a literal witch hunt in this country. She looks like his daughter? What do you mean? Okay. PJ. Ginger Ninja, that's hilarious. Wait, what? Based on of the minorities because of the race laws used against certain people. Trump is not convinced of a genocide happening. If that was the case, it would state that on the refugee. Saint. So you're playing semantical games. And what's more is you're playing semantical games against me, who have said openly and honestly that when we're talking about genocide, we have to be very careful with what we're meaning. I have said that. I have videos explaining exactly what you're trying to do semantically now. The question, however, is what kind of genocide are you actually talking about? What kind of genocide are you actually talking about? Because genocide can be many things. You can get cultural genocide, you can get economic genocide, you can get actual genocide. All three of these are parts of genocide. Genocide is also not a thing, it's not an event. Genocide is a process. To argue that there is no Afrikaner genocide happening in South Africa is to be blind and a moron. Because you're going, well, I haven't seen millions of Afrikaners being killed, so there's no genocide. Yeah, but that's the final stage of genocide. There are multiple stages leading up to genocide because genocide is a process, not an event. The culmination of genocide is the killing of millions of people in one night or in a week or in a month. But if you look at the process, most of the steps are there. Most of the stages are complete. Most of the stages are being carried out as we speak. So if you make the argument that there is just no genocide, you're being dishonest. You're purposefully being dishonest because it doesn't fit your narrative. Because you would like to lie about it, and therefore it makes it inconvenient. Whereas if you actually speak about what genocide is, you will know that you're being dishonest right now. Oh, crap. Thank you for the $70, dude. Really appreciate you, Gio. Thank you. Jack, I will listen to the people I sub to. Tired of explosions and tantrums. Chris who thinks here will be a civil war? I think... Yeah, I think... I don't know. Not civil war. Well, it depends on what you mean by civil war. There will be a war in South Africa. It will not be a race war, though. It'll be a war of good versus evil. It'll be a war where the good-natured people of this country destroy the liberal elite, destroy the left-wing communist, socialist, evil scumbags. That will be the war. And that is going to happen. There's far too many. I don't see a way in which it doesn't happen because the left and the evil on the left has no interest in compromise. They will watch this country burn before they allow anyone to fix it. Take, for example, do you guys know that leftist liberals hate the DA? It's interesting that the DA is the most left-wing party on the planet, and yet people like Peter Kriel and other left-wing liberals hate the DA. You want to know why they hate the DA? Because the DA isn't communist, and they want communism. That's the problem with liberals. Liberal politics is effectively a one-way track to hell. Always. And I don't mean hell in the way of the wrath of God. I mean hell in terms of wherever you don't want to live is the end result of liberal politics. Always. Liberal politics never leads to good outcomes. Ever. It leads to suffering, and it leads to human indignity and death. That's where it always ends up. So, and I think that is what the war is going to be. Ordinary people are going to have to fight that. Classic, anyone left of Mao Zedong as a Nazi? Yeah. Stop Americanizing South African politics. It's not Americanizing it, Azula. You're the one who Americanized it. Not us. You're the one who bought into the victim mentality, graciously accepting your white saviors as they sold you a victim lie. And now you wonder why you can't escape it. Why are you trapped in this hell that just does not seem to end? You're voting for all the right parties. You're voting for the ANC. They promise to be your saviors. You're voting for the EFF. They promise to be your saviors, except the very people you keep voting for are the only ones getting rich. The very people you keep voting for are the ones stealing you or robbing you blind. And yet, you did all the things that they told you to do. You blamed race. You blamed apartheid. You blamed slavery. You blamed colonialism. You blamed neocolonialism. You blamed capitalism. There's nothing that you have not blamed. And yet life isn't getting any better, but the people who claim to be your saviors, their lives are getting very good. And yet at no point do you stop to ask yourself, perhaps what they're selling me is working exactly as intended. Perhaps this was always the plan. White liberals. They're a particular brand of evil. I don't like liberals in general, no matter the race, but I have a particular hatred for white liberals. I despise their evil most of all because they're a particular type of racist. They're the worst kind of racist. You see, because they're the racists that will smile while leading people off a cliff. I can't stand that. We still need to blame Jan van Riebeeck, though. Centrist liberals can be okay, though, in my opinion. I don't think there is such a thing as a centrist liberal. I don't think that exists. I think the difference between a centrist liberal and a far leftist is about a decade. CW, yeah, I would prefer more freedom. I would prefer a government that allows people to pursue their own happiness without interference of the state, whatever that happiness looks like, right? Whatever you want to do, as long as it doesn't infringe upon anyone else's rights, you should be allowed to pursue that, and do the best that you can with that. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Liberalism is permissive. So I don't see Peter Kriel as a liberal, but he uses liberalism permissiveness to push for leftism. So my problem with liberalism as a philosophy is that it is completely baseless. It has no foundation, which is why the difference between a liberal and a leftist is about a decade. Liberalism has no foundation. It comes at it approaches a problem for which a basic question like why breaks the entire thing. So, for example, liberals will tell you freedom of speech. Why? Why freedom of speech? They'll say, oh, because it makes society better. There are actual places where I can show you how freedom of speech doesn't make things better, where some control of speech might actually be preferential, dependent on the kind of government you're trying to run, right? So, does that mean that we can not do free speech there? Or must we have free speech? What's the basis of this? Or human dignity, human rights? Why does a human have rights? For the liberal, the human doesn't inherently have rights. The human's right comes from whatever the human does, if they want to be honest. There's nothing underpinning that belief system. The belief system doesn't. There's no foundation for the belief system. The foundation, the best foundation liberalism has for itself is pointing to the successes of conservative mindsets and saying, see what we've built. Right, look at the society we've built. But there's not a single society that exists today that wasn't built by conservatives. Liberalism has never built a single society. It has destroyed many a society, but it's never built any.
I will do anything for money.
I spoke to Peter Krill once when he was just getting started on YouTube. He already had a TikTok following, though. How did you speak to him? I would legitimately put a hole in a wall speaking to that guy. He annoys me to no end. Do you have an email to share, or do you not do that? I would like to ask something and do not wish everyone to see. It is rather important. Geo, yes. So anyone who wants to email me, you can email me at askakalon@gmail.com. It should be in the community tab on my channel. The email should be there. So you can just email me there if you want to. Okay, so just like religion has no foundation. All right, that's a fair, well, it's not a fair point, but it's a point. Let me ask you, Arian, do you not imagine that the very existence of reality, the very fact that something rather than nothing exists, forms at least foundational to the idea that something might exist? Even if you don't believe it, but something might exist, no? The fact that there's something rather than nothing at least alludes to the idea that something might exist that's bigger than you or me. No? Integrate a following on victimhood. It is a lot harder when you speak about self-reliance and responsibility. Oh, yeah. Like, people want to hear that they're poor little victims and everyone needs to save them. That's what people want to hear. Right? Self-pity is a hell of a drug. When you sell people the idea that you have to take responsibility for yourself, that's not a message people want to hear. No one wants to hear you have to be responsible and you have to take responsibility for your own failures. We can learn from the Chinese. They took 800 million out of poverty in 20 years. PJ, most of those statistics are highly questionable, right? Highly questionable. And I actually mean from Chinese economists themselves, who question the idea that 800 million people have actually been lifted out of poverty. The problem that we have in China is that none of their actual data can be trusted, because all of their data comes from the central government. They don't have independent, they don't allow for independent audits. They don't allow for people to independently collect data. And so we genuinely don't know. But even then, I'm not underselling the Chinese miracle. What China did in the 20 years that the CCP have sort of opened up have been miraculous. And if anything, it should be a testament to the power of capitalism. That even in the most restrictive of regimes that wants to stop capitalism as much as possible, it still led to an economic miracle. Because for those of you who might not know anything about history, the Chinese were starving until the early 90s, when the CCP went to Japan to look at the economic miracle that was Japan. And in doing so, realized that, hold on, maybe this communism thing isn't working. Maybe it's time for us to open our markets. And so they did. They slowly started to open their markets, allowing foreign companies to compete, allowing their own businesses to compete with foreign companies. This was good. And then 2010 happens. Xi Jinping, realizing that, oh, this is chaotic, starts to close a lot of those gaps. And since 2010, we have started to see the economy of China slowly but surely cool down from where it once was to where it is now, where we don't know what the data shows because we can't trust the data. Because while prior to 2007, the Chinese were opening up their economy, since 2009, the Chinese have been closing their economy again. There are many economists, Chinese economists, who agree that China will likely see a backslide back to the bad days of communist China because they're trying to control things more and more. China's economy is hybrid, it's controlled capitalism. The words controlled capitalism is an oxymoron. It's socialism. China is a socialist economy. It's not capitalist. So, capitalism is just another word for free market. Free market. When you control the market is by definition not free, therefore it cannot be capitalistic because it's not free. So when you say controlled, just listen to this. When you say controlled capitalism, you're effectively saying controlled free market. That makes no sense. Those words don't work together. It is either a controlled market or it is a free market, but it cannot be both. China has a socialist market. The only difference is that China is a slightly more open socialist economy. They do allow for their citizens to do some business, provided that the state is involved in businesses that get too large. So for the ordinary people on the street, buy and sell as much as you want, do whatever you want, we don't care. The second your business gets large enough, the government takes a controlling stake in the company. And that's true for every single business. So they're effectively building what is called, maybe we can actually use your word controlled. They're building an controlled economy. Not quite falling into the pitfalls of communism, where you try to direct from a central governing body, which never actually works. Instead going, let's let people make the decisions, right, freely, and then we just control the people who make the decisions freely. That way we still control it. But you will very quickly realize when you actually look at what China is doing, you wouldn't want to live there. Because there is no freedom of speech. There is no autonomy. If the government decides that you've made a mistake, you're gone. Right? So I think the other problem is people tend to underestimate how long economies can take before you actually see the results. A lot of people look at what China is currently going through and they go, see, communism works. Clearly communism works. The problem with that is just that let's see what happens with the next crisis. Let's wait for the next crisis. Because the next crisis is going to reveal whether or not China can actually survive. You see, it's always throughout history. You look at the Soviet Union, you look at Mao's China. Both of those nations did relatively well for quite a while. They had some oopsies in the beginning, but then they started to effectively fix themselves. And things started to go a bit better. And then crises happens, as they always do. And because these countries were so rigid in their controls, they were incapable of responding to the crises in the right way. And this led to famine and large-scale destruction. You see, because individuals, a free market, tends to be very good at responding to crises. It can figure it out, provided the government doesn't try to kill its ability to figure it out. And you, to some extent, saw that during COVID. Because the government said no businesses are allowed to be open, a lot of businesses figured out how to do it in spite of not being allowed to be open, right? That was wrong from the government to do so, but even then, the market still managed to figure it out. Government, on the other hand, tends to be very slow at realizing their mistake. try hiring activists and advocates for Taiwanese sovereignty. That's extreme from government perspective, but goes the same for all forms of speech there, from what I understand. They don't allow a lot of speech. Right now, there are multiple big factories that have been set alight across China because so many people lost their jobs. Oh yeah, I heard the job crisis is a bit of a problem there, right? Is based on a belief of everyone is internally good enough to feel guilty for ripping each other off, so the market doesn't need external intervention beyond major crises. Kind of not entirely true. Because again, here we have to discuss no different than living in a broken democracy, but it is different to living in a proper democracy. No, Arian? Living in a country that actually works would be preferable to living in China. So yeah, I get it. Look, I get it. South Africa isn't working, right? And things in South Africa aren't going well, at least not at the moment. But freedom will always be preferential to control. And the reason for that is the individual will always know what they need better than anyone else. And that's why communism can never actually work. Because communism can never actually provide what the individual needs. Now, onto your point, Caleb. People hear capitalism and they think of one thing. Because communism is just one thing and socialism is just one thing. They think capitalism is just one thing. But in reality, whenever someone says capitalism, my first question usually is what capitalism? What school of capitalism are you referring to? Because you could be referring to classical economics. You could be referring to marginal economics. You could be referring to hybrid economics, so the school of hybrid economics. You could be referring to laissez-faire capitalism. There's a bunch of others as well that makes it even more confusing. And all of these capitalisms have completely different ways of pushing the markets, right? Of creating the markets and allowing the markets to operate. Laissez-faire capitalism, for example, is what you were referring to, right? The idea that the market is completely free and just allowed to do whatever it wants and people will just govern themselves. Very few people still hold on to that view, and those who do are, I would say, in a dying minority, because we know that the one flaw in that thinking is that you're not accounting for human greed. You're not accounting that humans will use their greed in order to circumvent the natural mechanisms of the market. And so laissez-faire capitalism almost always ends in the same way, a few companies controlling everything. So laissez-faire capitalism, I'm not even a fan of that, right? That's not something I want. Instead, I am what is known as a classical economist, no, I'm not an economist. Just to be clear, I'm just someone that loves economics. But I'm what is known as a classical adherent, right? So I adhere to classical economics. And classical economics looks at the prospect of value. And it says that value lies in labor. Now, that's different to communism that says value lies in the workers. Under classical economics, value lies in labor, and that includes the entire labor process. So, how do we determine value? Well, we look at how long does it take to make something, how many people are involved in the making of the project, how complex is the project to be made, and then what are the minerals and the resources involved in making the project or the product. And then based on that, value is ascribed, right, to the product. Or to the service, but value comes from that. So it's the value proposition of where things come from, and then when you change your mindset to that, it becomes important it becomes important that labor is also taken into account during the decision-making process. So you're not just thinking about marginal capitalism, by the way, is the one that we all live in now. It's called marginal capitalism. For those of you that don't know, it believes that value is determined in the margins, meaning nothing has value. This battery, for example, has no value except what I could get you to pay for it. So in other words, this battery has zero value except what I can convince you to pay for it. That's marginal capitalism. And it's to some extent not wrong, right? That is sort of the value of it. If I can convince you to pay me 10 million for this battery, you'll pay me 10 million for the battery, if you had it, of course. But that's sort of marginal thinking of it. Under classical economics, governments are incentivized to create almost, the way I like to explain this is, all of you here know what rugby is, right? Even the Americans in chat. I'm assuming there's a couple of Americans here. You guys know what rugby is, right? You've at least seen it. Or think of football, American football, if you don't know what rugby is. Rugby is a game where the players are completely free to play the game within the rules of the game. The ref cannot tell the ball carrier when to pass the ball or to whom they should pass the ball. Only that player can determine who they want to pass the ball for or to, right? And in the same vein, the rules merely determine how should the player choose to pass the ball, can they pass the ball? Right? But it doesn't say when a player can or cannot. The player can, whenever they want to, pass the ball, provided they stick to the rules of the game. The rules of the game is what allows the game to be played freely. If you removed all of the rules, it wouldn't take long for someone to figure out, hey, I can just take a sword, like a samurai sword, onto the field, kill the opponents, and then we win. Right? So we have rules. We say, no, you can absolutely not do that. That would not be in the spirit of the game. And so we're going to have rules. That way, everyone can play the game on equal footing and we can enjoy the game together. This is what modern economics stands for, or classical economics stands for. The government's role is to determine the rules of the game and ensure that the rules always favor more competition. So whenever the government sees that some of the rules are leading to monopolies, it is the government's role to step in and change the rules to ensure more competition rather than less competition or more monopoly. This is the sort of basic breakdown of classical economics. So it's not that it's not that we trust that people will just be nice and not greedy. We know that people will be greedy. In fact, we're hoping that they will be greedy because greed is what provides products. Bill Gates didn't make Windows because he wanted to do something nice for humanity. He made Windows because he wanted to make money. Steve Jobs didn't create Apple because he was nice. He did it because he wanted to make money. Greed is good in the capitalistic sense, not in the religious sense. Greed is really bad and you shouldn't be greedy. But in the capitalistic sense, greed is good. We use greed in order to gain products and to tap people's creative energy. The point is more, how do we direct that greed so that it benefits society at large? And this is where the government can absolutely have a role to play. Do you think the American system is good? No, I don't. Don't get me wrong, I love America. Patrick, how you doing, bro? I love America. I have always been a huge fan of America. There was a time where I knew more about American politics than what I knew about South African politics. I have read the Constitution of America. I have read the constitutional documents. I have read the founding documents. I have read the founding papers, the constitutional papers, I believe they're called. I have read about the founding fathers of America. From a philosophical perspective, I love America. And I think America truly is the greatest country on earth. I believe that. Because it's true. You can see it, right? There's something special there. I love my own country as well. And I think South Africa has the ability to become the greatest country on earth. But it is not that yet. And it's because of a government that is particularly evil and malicious. But we can be. Maybe not the greatest country on earth. We're not quite as big as America. But we can certainly be one of the greatest countries on earth. Because our people have the same kind of spirit. And this is not just from Afrikaners. This is from the people of South Africa have the same kind of go-getter, we take care of it ourselves spirit, at least in the margins. So there's something good there. But I think the American system is sick. I think the American system is corrupt. I think politicians have allowed for so much corruption to seep into the American system that it has effectively locked ordinary Americans into a cycle of struggle that they will almost never escape from. I think that's what Trump is desperately trying to turn around. That's what Trump is trying to save Americans from. It's why he's made such a big deal of lowering taxes on the middle and the working class, but also lowering the budget deficits of America to try and save Americans from having to deal with the day that those debts have to finally be repaid. I think that's why Trump is doing so much to try and get America back into factories, back into producing, away from just constantly, endlessly consuming and driving up their deficits. So I think that's what Trump is doing. I'm not suggesting here that Trump is doing it successfully, although I think he's doing as well as can be expected. I am not educated enough to say whether or not it will be a good thing in the end. I think it will be based on my understanding of economics. I think what Trump is doing is amazing, but I could be wrong, right? Because I'm not educated enough to make that determination. And I'm certainly not comfortable enough to make predictions on the future there. But right now, I'm sort of cautiously optimistic that some good might come of it. But I think there's a lot more that's needed in America to fix the rot that is in your political system. The American system is similar to the Presbyterian Church government. How so, Jay? Well, also you get good politicians and bad ones. They will never be perfect. Aurora, I would ask, who's the good politicians? Isaac, I have no idea what congregation you're talking about there. I'm sorry, but when you say good politicians, I don't understand that. That's a statement that just over my head. I'm like, where, when, how? Not in this country. Okay. Well, dit is fine. Ek sal maak asof ek dit nie gesien het nie. Ons kan dit maak asof jy dit nie asof jy dit nie gesê het nie. What is the sports ball you're talking about? Dude, did you see the rugby on Saturday? I felt sad for the Japanese, I'm going to be honest. I did not enjoy... Oh, before I leave you guys, I have something to admit. A very sad day for me. But also at the same time, I'm actually not sad about it. Guess what I did on Friday? I watched a movie, but guess which one? No, not Alien. No. I've watched Titanic like 13 times in my life. I'm not afraid to admit I was a fan of Titanic. Dude, I watched Titanic to the point where I would laugh in the cinema. Like, it would be funny to me. That's how many times me and my cousin went to watch Titanic. We spammed that crap. So no, I've watched Titanic. None really do scary movies. Yeah, I don't like scary movies. Copper Rose, I don't watch scary movies at all. Both the American government and Presbyterian Church government feature a separation of powers, a federal system with local and higher bodies, and governance through elected representatives. Oh, yeah. In that way, I guess, true. Yeah. I haven't seen anything particularly negative from him. I've no idea about Finnish politics, though, Caleb. I know, but I had to try. No, I do not like scary movies. Scary movies suck. No, I watched K-pop Demon Hunters. I went to some friends. We had dinner, and they showed me K-pop Demon Hunters, and I liked it. I thought it was cool. I thought it was a cool movie. It's not the greatest movie on earth. Like there's better movies out there, but I thought the music was pretty cool. I thought the story was fantastic. For what it was, no leftist nonsense. It was cool. I thought it was nice. He lowered the tax for the rich, but he didn't. He lowered the tax for the working class and the middle class way more than for the rich man. Please do not read CNN and think that's news. Like, holy crap, dude. Based anti-demon propaganda. Het jy Witcher 3 gespeel? Yep. Witcher 3 is een van my favorite games, right? So watch Dugan Anki, Komodo Days, Black Clover, The Way of the House Husband. That's my one anime for the year. We can talk about another anime in 2029. I've watched one now. That'll do me just fine. For movies and series to leave out the lefty politics. But in this instance, the lefty politics was left out. I mean, the movie was just good. It was the first movie that I have seen out of like the modern era where the guy was actually the hero. And it's weird. Some people may have missed this because people might think that the girl was the hero, but the guy sacrificed himself so that she could defeat the demon. The guy is the hero of that story. Because that's what guys used to do for those of you that's too young to remember this, but in olden Hollywood movies, the guy, the hero of the story, would usually be the one to sacrifice himself. Spirited Away, so cute. Actually, all the SG movies are cute. Hate the American foreign policy with all their regime change operations. Yeah, but that's a whole different discussion. I hate that too. Trump hates that too. So, you might like Trump for that. Barry, wat mense, how dare hulle make a vid out die wenner? I don't even know. I think he's Asian though. Isaac. Side channel with the gaming and music again. Patrick, yeah, I have another channel, but I'm so busy with the politics and so busy just constantly reading about South African politics that I'm not sure how. I'm not sure how to get everything else fitted in, but I will. I do want to start another channel, but I'm also busy with a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm working on. So we'll see. We'll see what time allows. For now, I'll just do live streams and videos because that's what I can do for now. Let's be good enough. This year's NA politics just popped off. Yeah. It's starting to cool down now. It is starting to cool down. You can look at the views, for example. We went from having, almost on average, every video would get 40, 50, 60,000 views. It's now to about between 6 and 10,000 views, which is expected. I think the Donald Trump stuff was particularly huge, and that really got people excited. Now we're waiting for the next big catastrophe to hit, and I think people will then once again be on board with whatever the hell is happening here. It was in the monstrous grunt phase of content creation. Dude, I am grinding every single day, and I'm loving it. I love the content I make now. This is so much fun for me. I think if I ever do another channel with gaming and stuff, it'll not be a daily thing. It'll be talking only about the stuff I care about. Not even trying to do daily stuff anymore because there's just so much gaming news that I couldn't care less about, you know? But when that's your channel, that's what you have to cover because people want to know the news. Whereas now I get to do whatever the hell I want to do, and it just happens to be the thing that you guys like. Are you editing all the videos yourself? Yep. Yeah. I'm doing everything myself, Cesius. Literally everything. I don't have an editor. I don't have writers. I don't have researchers. I do everything myself. Luckily, the editing isn't too hard. That's not the end of the world. But right. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it from me. I don't want to make these afternoon streams too long because I want people to actually be able to watch them and get through them and, not feel like they're watching a full-blown Twitch live stream. I really appreciate all of you for coming out, for hanging out with me, for spending some time with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I really hope that you found value in the conversations we had here today, and maybe you learned something. Maybe you feel like I haven't learned something and you want to teach me, then please email me or message me on Discord. The links are all in the description down below. If you message me on Discord, just know that I can sometimes take a little bit long to reply, but I will reply the second I see your message. As always, ladies and gentlemen, be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.